I'm Sheryl Lightfoot. I'm with the University of British Columbia in Vancouver, Canada, where I serve as the Canada Research Chair of Global Indigenous Rights and Policy. I hold academic appointments in political science, the School of Public Policy and Global Affairs, and Indigenous Studies there. Indigenous peoples insist on the right to free, prior, and informed consent essentially because they wish to be equal to all other peoples on Earth. The right to give consent is an inherent human right. It's universal. It stems from the universal human right of self-determination, which again, because it's a human right, governments don't give it, they can't take it away. Government's role is to respect, recognize, and honor human rights. It's up to governments to figure out how to do this equally for all peoples. The problem is, Indigenous peoples have had not a full right to consent equal to all other peoples on the planet. And we can think of this if we think about medical decisions or decisions to participate in a research project. A full consenting adult has the ability to say yes, to say no, or to say yes with conditions. So if we imagine that someone is not quite a full adult, say a child or an adult that's not at full capacity, someone else needs to make those decisions on their behalf and in their best interest. Now, if we think about the status of Indigenous peoples in many of our countries, like Canada or the United States, and we look back at the not-so-distant past, beginning in the 19th century, Indigenous peoples' rights to make their own decisions were taken away by those states. So beginning with things like the Indian Act in Canada or the end of treaty making in the United States and a shift in policy beginning certainly by the late 19th century and extending through the 20th and now into the 21st. Indigenous peoples have had less than equal rights to make decisions on their own behalf over issues that impact them. So I can give you a few examples. Determining who's a member of your community. In Canada, the Indian Act, a federal piece of legislation, and the federal government decide who has Indian status and who does not. So what we would like to see, free, prior, and informed consent, is communities able to make their own decisions about who's a member of their community. Another example would be tribal ordinances in the United States. A tribe has the ability to pass an ordinance to cover its own jurisdiction, its own territory, its own people. Yet, that ordinance has to go to Washington and be approved by the Bureau of Indian Affairs. So this is coming from a 19th century framework that says that Indigenous peoples are not capable of making their own decisions over their own issues, their own peoples, their own lands, territories, and resources. And therefore the US government treats them something like wards or children. And if we look back into the late 19th century and early 20th century, we can see laws that said if an Indigenous person went to university or voted, they would cease to be an Indian, what we called them at that time. So beginning about the 1960s, late 1960s and early into the 1970s, Indigenous peoples were beginning to graduate from universities and some with law degrees. And they began to fully realize the laws and structures that had put them into a second-class human rights status. And so they began advocating for themselves and demanding that they have the same rights as everyone else. Because if we remember at that time, this post-civil rights era and a decolonization era, there was an ethos and an action around the world of equality and to eliminate racial discrimination at the time. So Indigenous peoples observed that they had a second-class set of rights in countries that were also advocating that they were equal. So they saw a catch-22, and they started demanding that they have equality of human rights the same as everyone else. The situation has been in our countries that Indigenous peoples have a second-class set of rights. And part of this is that they do not have the full right of self-determination equal to all other peoples. So by insisting on the right of free, prior, and informed consent, they are just simply advocating for an equal set of rights as self-determining peoples. I'd like to provide two examples of spaces in North America where free, prior, and informed consent are playing a crucial role, or perhaps I could say are contributing to a conflict situation. The first is in the United States, and it's in the area of the reservation of Standing Rock, which is North Dakota and South Dakota. The situation there is several years ago, a decision was made to put a pipeline through the territory and across the river, the Missouri River, near Standing Rock Reservation. Well, the first proposed pathway of the pipeline was to pass just north of the city of Bismarck, North Dakota, which is the capital of North Dakota. And there were consultations held with the residents of Bismarck who expressed strong discontent with that proposed pathway, because if there was an accident on the pipeline, it would affect their water supply since they were just downstream from where the pipeline was to cross the river. As a consequence of those consultations and that discontent by the residents of Bismarck, the pathway of the pipeline was officially moved to south of Bismarck so that the city of Bismarck's water supply would be safe. Problem is that the second proposed pathway of the pipeline was drawn to be just north of the Standing Rock Reservation, which would have put the water supply of Standing Rock Reservation in jeopardy. And unfortunately, the Standing Rock Reservation was never consulted on the project in the same way that the residents of Bismarck were consulted. The pipeline was just set to go through near the reservation. So that sets up an inequality. And what happened was an extreme conflict where the residents of Standing Rock started demanding equal rights of free, prior, and informed consent over the pathway of the pipeline. And the government and the company rejected their claim to free, prior, and informed consent because they determined it was in the best national interest to put the pipeline through at that point. So the peoples of Standing Rock were denied their equal right to free, prior, and informed consent. And as a result, there was a major conflict, a flashpoint, that lasted for several months before it was forcibly put down. We have another case ongoing in Canada, and this one is playing out in the courts. Up in the northeast corner of British Columbia, which is Treaty 8 territory, there's a gorgeous region called the Peace River Valley. And there is a proposal, and construction has begun, on a massive dam project called the Site C Dam, which will flood a great portion of the Peace River Valley, Treaty 8 territory. Now, consultations were held in accordance with Canadian law in the area. However, the First Nations of the area, while they were consulted, never gave their free, prior, and informed consent for the project. So they are contesting the project in Canadian courts. Canada asserts that it has met its obligation under the duty to consult because it has consulted and it has accommodated to a certain extent the First Nations and their wishes. However, if we were to take a free, prior, and informed consent frame on the Site C Dam, because those particular First Nations are most impacted, in fact, their lands will be completely flooded out by the dam, that they should have the ability to say yes, to say no, or to say yes with conditions to a project, not simply to be consulted and accommodated, which could mean if a project is determined, like this one, to be in the best national interest or the best interest of society at large, that their consent can be overruled by the government or a multinational corporation, or in this case, BC Hydro. So if we were to take a free, prior, and informed consent process in these cases, we would have very different outcomes. But what it would mean is that Indigenous peoples' right to free, prior, and informed consent was fully recognized as equal to all other peoples. I think oftentimes free, prior, and informed consent is interpreted as a veto power or somehow a special right of Indigenous peoples. And I think what's important to remember is that free, prior, and informed consent, or what we often refer to as FPIC, is simply recognizing that Indigenous peoples have equal rights. And if we put it in very human terms, like a medical procedure, as I mentioned earlier, or a right to participate in a research project, or even at a most basic human level, the right to enter a marriage. You can say yes, you can say no, or you can say yes with conditions, and that makes you a fully functioning human being. And that's all Indigenous people are asking for, is their full right to be equal and fully functioning human beings.